10-year-old Caleb Reyes had exactly one sandwich, one apple, and a single dollar bill folded in his backpack. He was about to give away all three to a man he'd never met sitting alone on a bench, wearing a coat that didn't fit and shoes with no laces. Caleb didn't know that stranger would one day stand in front of a judge and save his family from losing everything. It was a gray Tuesday in October, the kind of afternoon where the wind cuts through jackets that aren't quite warm enough. Caleb walked the same route home from school every day, past Riverside Park, where the oak trees had already dropped most of their leaves onto the cracked pavement. He noticed the man for the first time that week. He sat on the same bench near the fountain, always alone, always still, like he was waiting for something that never came. His beard was gray and uneven, his hands rough and cracked from the cold. Most kids walked past without looking twice. Caleb wasn't most kids. "You eat lunch yet?" Caleb asked, stopping a few feet away. The man looked up, startled that anyone had spoken to him at all. "It's been a while, kid," he said quietly. Caleb didn't hesitate. He unzipped his backpack, pulled out the sandwich his mother had packed that morning, turkey and cheese, cut diagonally, the way he liked it, and held it out. "I'm not that hungry today," Caleb lied. He was always hungry after school, but something about the man's eyes made the lie feel small compared to what it might mean to him. The man hesitated, then took it. "What's your name?" "Caleb." "Thank you, Caleb. I won't forget this." Caleb shrugged like it was nothing and walked home, the dollar bill still folded in his pocket. He'd meant to give that too, but he'd lost his nerve. A dollar felt like it might embarrass the man, somehow, more than the sandwich did. He kept it, feeling a strange guilt about the coin in his pocket the whole walk home. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb kept sharing his lunch. Some days it was half a sandwich. Other days, an orange, a granola bar, whatever he could spare without his mother noticing the pattern. He never told anyone, not his mother, not his best friend Marcus, not even his little sister Nadia, who noticed everything. "You've been coming home hungrier," his mother, Elena, said one evening, watching him eat a second dinner, helping like he'd been starved all day. "I'm just growing," Caleb said, which was true, but not the whole truth. Elena Reyes worked 2 jobs, mornings at a diner, evenings cleaning offices downtown, ever since Caleb's father had left them 3 years earlier without so much as a phone call since. Money was always tight, but she never let her children go without a full plate, even if it meant she ate less herself. She didn't know her son was quietly doing the same thing for a stranger. One afternoon, Marcus caught Caleb handing over his lunch. "You know that's kind of weird, right?" Marcus said. "My mom says you're not supposed to talk to guys like that. He could be dangerous." "He's not dangerous," Caleb said. "He's just alone." Marcus didn't understand it, and honestly, neither did Caleb, not entirely. He just knew that every time he handed the man something, the man's shoulders seemed to relax a little, like a weight had been set down, even for a few minutes. The man's name, Caleb finally learned, was Walter. He didn't talk about himself much, not where he came from, not how he'd ended up on that bench. But he asked Caleb about school, about his sister, about what he wanted to be when he grew up. Caleb told him he wanted to be an engineer because he liked figuring out how things worked. Walter's eyes lit up at that, just slightly, like something had stirred that had been dormant a long time. By December, the weather turned harsh, and one Tuesday, the bench was empty. Caleb waited 15 minutes in the cold before giving up and walking home, worried in a way he didn't fully understand. The bench stayed empty the next day, and the next. Caleb asked a groundskeeper in the park if he'd seen the man who usually sat by the fountain. The groundskeeper shrugged. "Guys like that come and go, kid. Might have moved on to a shelter for the winter. Happens all the time." Caleb never saw Walter again that year. He kept looking for months, checking the bench out of habit long after he'd stopped expecting to find him there. Eventually, life moved forward the way it does for a 10-year-old. Middle school started. His mother picked up more hours. The memory of Walter faded into something Caleb rarely thought about, tucked away like an old photograph. 3 years later, when Caleb was 13, everything in the Reyes household changed overnight. A letter arrived, thick, official, stamped with a courthouse seal. Their landlord was selling the building, and a paperwork error from years earlier, buried in an old lease dispute, meant Elena Reyes was suddenly being sued for back rent she had already paid, with documentation she could no longer find. The amount named in the lawsuit was more money than she made in 8 months combined. Elena sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the letter, her hands trembling. "We could lose everything, Caleb," she admitted, forgetting for a moment that he was still a kid and not someone she needed to protect from the truth. "I don't even know if we can afford a lawyer to fight this." Caleb had never seen his mother look that afraid. Not during the years right after his father left, not during the worst of the bad months. This was different. This was the fear of losing the one stable thing they had, their home. Weeks later, with a public defender who had barely enough time to review their case, Elena and Caleb sat in a small courtroom, waiting for a hearing that felt like it would decide everything. Caleb barely recognized the man who walked in and sat down at the opposing table representing the property management company. But then a second man entered, older, sharply dressed in a gray suit, silver hair combed neatly, nothing at all like the coat and broken shoes Caleb remembered. He sat down beside their overwhelmed public defender and spoke quietly to her for a moment before standing to address the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter my appearance as pro bono counsel for the defendant." Caleb froze. He knew that voice. It was Walter. Walter Hale, it turned out, had once been one of the most respected contract attorneys in the state until a car accident took his wife and left him drowning in grief, debt, and a slow unraveling that cost him his license, his home, and nearly his life. He had spent almost 2 years living on the street, including that fall by the fountain in Riverside Park, before a former colleague recognized him, got him into treatment, and helped him fight to get his law license reinstated. Walter had never forgotten the boy who shared his lunch without being asked, without knowing his name, without expecting anything back. When Caleb's public defender had mentioned the case name, Reyes, during a Bar Association volunteer meeting weeks earlier, Walter had asked to see the file out of nothing more than curiosity about a family with that last name from his old neighborhood. When he saw Caleb's name on the paperwork, he canceled every other appointment that week. In under 20 minutes, Walter dismantled the opposing case, presenting bank records he'd tracked down himself, proving the disputed rent had been paid in full, plus interest owed back to the Reyes family for the landlord's error. The judge ruled entirely in Elena's favor. Outside on the courthouse steps, Elena tried to find the words to thank a man she'd never met before that morning. Walter simply looked at Caleb. "You probably don't remember me," Walter said. "I remember everything," Caleb said, his voice catching. "You said you wouldn't forget." "I didn't," Walter said. "Not for one single day." Caleb never thought a sandwich and a few quiet afternoons could matter to anyone. He'd given what he had because it felt like the right thing to do, not because he expected anything back. But kindness has a way of finding its way home, sometimes years later, in ways no one could have planned. Walter still visits the Reyes family every few months now. He never asks for anything. He just says the same thing every time he leaves. "I still remember, Caleb. I always will."